Hello, movie lovers. Welcome back to Apocalypse Movies. And we're here today to talk a little bit of Warcraft, one of the newer releases from this weekend. And Gio and I have saw it last night. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jacob Bartley, and I'm joined, like I said, by Gio Ramos. What's going on, man?
Yeah, good. I'm still trying to figure out what I was watching. That's not to say. This movie does a lot of explanation, so we'll get to that.
Yeah, so before we get started on this, first of all, this is a non-spoiler review. We're not going to spoil the movie for you guys. It just came out, so a lot of people haven't seen it yet. But also, Gio and I know close to nothing about Warcraft. I've never played the game. I've never looked up any of the mythology about it. I don't know, Gio, you don't know much at all either, right?
I played like 2 hours, and then I couldn't go any further.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. I kind of want to play the games now. But anyways, let's get into it. We're going to talk about our general thoughts, give our positives, our negatives, and then an overall score out of 10 without spoiling the film. So, Gio, just 1 or 2 sentences sum up your thoughts of the movie after walking out of the theater.
2 sentences. It's a good video game movie, I'll say that. It sets up the mythology of Warcraft and pretty much a franchise moving forward very well. There's characters that you meet, and some you find interesting, some you don't care about, but the former outweighs the latter. And the visual effects are pretty much this isn't saying much, but the visual effects is the best I've seen in any video game movie. Again, that's not saying much, but it's the truth. These orcs look pretty badass, especially up close.
The orcs look amazing.
Yeah. I love the world. You get to go to several different places. The story, it's right there. It's all great on paper. It isn't executed as well, but it's still something that you're at times invested in. So I'll say it's fun. It's entertaining. If you're gonna watch it, it's a movie that you have to see in either XD or IMAX to get the full experience. Duncan Jones and Blizzard Entertainment, they spent about 2 years of post-production work on this movie, and for that alone, I think it's worth seeing.
Yeah, I enjoyed it overall, honestly. I am a huge fantasy guy. I love the Lord of the Rings franchise. I like the Hobbit movies, but my childhood is partially Lord of the Rings. I love those movies. I think they're some of the best ever made. So I'm going into this movie hoping it's going to be good, at least, because I want there to be a new prominent fantasy franchise from now on. And I think the best thing this movie did was establish this world and get us ready for a potential world-building universe that could hopefully go on if the box office makes enough money for them to gain a profit, which is doing really good overseas right now.
China, it's killing.
Hopefully it does well enough domestically to make a bit of a profit. So we'll see how it goes. It's still going to keep making more money. It literally just came out in the U.S., so we'll see how that goes. But I don't know how to perceive the movie as a Warcraft fan. I've heard from people who are Warcraft fans that they'd enjoyed it because there's a whole bunch of Easter eggs. And I don't know if you noticed this, Gio, but while we're in the theater, I could hear fans like cheering, and like when something would come on that we had no idea what it was, you could hear people like cheering and getting excited.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you those are Warcraft fans. So I think if you know about this world and you know about the mythology and the characters, I think you're going to enjoy this movie a lot more. Yeah. For me, I was lost at times because I didn't know what was going on. Not that the movie did the best job it could at explaining things, but part of it is you have to kind of know the world. I compare it to how casual Star Wars fans watch The Force Awakens and they didn't understand it. They don't understand how the Force works. So they watch The Force Awakens like, oh, why did this happen? And I explain it to them, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. So I feel like a casual Warcraft fan, like I don't understand the world. So it's not going to make complete sense to me, but I'm sure if I talk to somebody who is a Warcraft fan and knows the mythology, I think they could explain it to me. So I think this movie, it's not bad, it's not great. I think it's good, and it's just good enough for me to say it's probably the best video game movie since Mortal Kombat. Can't think of another good video game movie.
No.
But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. The best thing about it is the world. I think it made you feel like you were in that world. And I think that's the best thing it did. And
Yeah.
it set up a lot of cool things that could possibly move forward. So let's talk a little bit more about exactly what you enjoyed about Warcraft, Gio.
Well, I'll talk about the orcs. I've loved their look ever since we got the first image. It's more fantasy than practical, which this film, when we were first talking about it, it was drawing a lot of comparisons to Lord of the Rings. Like, oh, you got people with swords and shields, orcs versus humans, and there's even dwarves and this and that. And it's like, yeah, but Warcraft is taking a more fantasy approach to this movie. So I'll say the orcs, they look terrific. There are a couple characters who you really feel for and get attached to, like the lead orc Durotan,
Is that his name?
Durotan, played by Toby Kebbell, who does an amazing job with motion capture every time he does it. Well, he's only done it twice, but the other time was even more amazing. I'll say that the battle scenes, particularly between the orcs themselves, are pretty amazing to watch. They're fun. Paula Patton as the half-breed orc, and is it human?
Yeah.
Orc and human.
She's hot.
She's surprisingly good. Like, this is her last time I saw her was in Ghost Protocol, Mission Impossible, and she was good in that movie. So she's on a little bit of a run right now. I like the magic. Again, I don't understand what they're doing or any of that kind of stuff, but whenever they're doing it, Ben Foster as Medivh, or his apprentice, who was, good at times. It looked good on screen for me. It was cool to look at. Some sorcery stuff. Remind me a little bit of what we could see in Doctor Strange. Granted that might look a little better, but whatever. And again, the worlds, the landscape, dude. Like, it's all great to look at. And even if you're not a Warcraft fan, you can say like, wow, this looks awesome, it looks great. I don't really have that much more to say. You'll probably touch on some positives. This is kind of like in the moment thing.
Yeah, most of the visuals were really good. There's a few things that threw me off, but for the most part, the world looks beautiful. The orcs look fantastic. I think the orcs look freaking great, way better than the orcs in the Hobbit series, because the Hobbit series were CGI.
Oh,
I'm not talking about Lord of the Rings.
No,
I'm talking about the Hobbit movies.
Yeah, I
Lord
know.
of the Rings.
That was all practical.
Yeah, those are my favorite type of orcs, the Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy. But yeah, I really enjoyed the look of the orcs, and my favorite character, the one I cared the most about, the one I was totally invested in, is Durotan. His story is so compelling. There was no weak spots in his character. I didn't feel like.
No, I didn't see any.
As far as motion capture, it's motion capture, right? Toby Kebbell was fantastic yet again. He was great as the bad ape in was it Rise of the Planet of the Apes? Dawn of the Planet of the Apes? Yeah, he killed it. I think he's probably second to Andy Serkis in as far as motion capture performers right now. Like, I can't think of another one who's doing it, has had two roles like that who are fantastic. I thought Paula Patton was okay. She was a lot better than I thought she was going to be. But a performance I really enjoyed was Ben Foster's. I actually thought, well, I didn't love the character that much. I loved his performance as Medivh. He was so awesome. Like, you didn't know what was up with him, but just the way he portrayed the character was fantastic. And you know what? I actually liked, Dominic Cooper, because
The king?
He played the king, and he plays the Howard Stark type character. He always plays that character, the smartass, the charming ladies man. That's not who he was in this movie. He showed me he could play a different role. He was very serious, very laid back, and he played like a reserved type of king character, and I really appreciated seeing something different from him. So as far as performances, that's what I really enjoyed.
I gotta throw out Travis Fimmel, who played Lothar.
Oh, okay.
He had some good moments in there.
Yeah, for sure. And just the magical elements, I really enjoyed that part. I want to know more about that. They, like I said earlier, I feel like if I knew more about the mythology, I would understand it more. But I think if there are sequels, that we'll get to some more explanations as behind what feeds the magic, how does it work, and everything. So yeah, those are some. And the battles, the action is freaking awesome. As it's as brutal as you probably could have made it for PG-13, and how if you want to keep it family safe, because you want kids to be able to go to this movie. So the action was awesome.
Like an orc will punch a human, but you won't see blood splatter. Or
Yeah,
anything like
but
that.
there's some pretty brutal stuff in there,
Yeah,
especially near the end. All right, well, those are some of the things that worked for the movie with us. What are a few negatives that stood out to you, Gio?
Well, again, this movie has to cater to both the fans of Warcraft and the people who don't. They want to reach out to the widest audience possible. And so where it fails on that part is, I think, again, there's not enough explanation, of certain things like the sorcery, the magic, that kind of stuff. And there's not enough development with all the characters. There's some characters that you just don't care about, like Duratan's probably the most interesting orc. He's the only interesting orc, honestly. Others, they're given moments that aren't really earned, like twists. I won't get into any spoilers here. Ben Foster's Medivh character, I don't know. You don't know what's going on with him half the time,
And you still, after the movie ends, you're still not sure.
Yeah, you're not
And
sure.
I think that's a big fault.
Like, what happens, but it's like,
yeah, it could have been made a bit more clear.
like, why do I care?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know. It set itself up more for a sequel than it did a foundation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's what I said that when we walked out.
Yeah. So, those are really the main negatives. They're big negatives. But, I can't touch into it too much without
spoiling. Yeah, we're gonna put out a spoiler discussion review probably sometime next week. But just for me, there was a lot of plot holes. There's things like, wait, come on now, the audience isn't stupid. That doesn't even make sense. And then there's one performance which bothered me and took me out of the movie, and it was the actor who played Khadgar, the young magic guy, Ben Foster's apprentice, you could say.
Yeah.
Everyone else is acting and talking as if they're in the medieval times,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
This character, this actor, is talking like he's in modern day, and he's trying to be funny and jokey, and just the way his body language and the way he spoke was like he was somebody from modern day making fun of medieval times. Like, he wasn't even trying to talk in medieval times. He was just somebody like they dressed up in cosplay today and were just making jokes at Comic-Con. Like, that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I'm intrigued in the character because they established that he's going to be very important going forward, I think. But I don't know why they portrayed the character that way. I mean, was he told to do that, or was that the actor's fault? I don't know. So I don't know who to blame there. It was a lot of things were very predictable. And there's 3 or 4 moments where you're supposed to feel something, and they try to make you feel that pain or that anger or that fear, and it just doesn't work.
Right.
So those are big negatives for me. Those aren't just things I can let slide. So overall, those are my negatives. All right, well, let's end this with our regular score out of 10 and just your closing thoughts.
Duncan Jones, he does a commendable job with Warcraft. This is not a property that you can adapt easily.
Not at all.
I loved his basic approach of humans versus orcs. Keep it simple, because there's like other species and all that stuff out there, races. So I love the simplistic approach. It could have been executed a little more better, but setting up the whole entire world of Warcraft, like, I'm in for a sequel, even though this may not have been like the great video game movie that we were all anticipating. That might be saved down the road for Assassin's Creed, but nevertheless, it's a movie worth watching if you want to get that full Warcraft experience, of what Warcraft can offer. So with that in mind, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I just got to say, if you're a fantasy fan, go see this movie, because there's There's no movies coming out recently or anytime in the near future that are like this. And I think on that end, it's very enjoyable. The negatives aren't enough to make it unwatchable. Like it's a very enjoyable film and it's very entertaining. And I think that's what it really comes down to. It could have been better. I feel like they cut a lot of stuff out of the movie, and I feel like the director's cut will be a little bit longer and it'll make more sense.
We need to talk about that in like a separate podcast.
We could talk about it on the spoilers review.
Yeah.
So for me, just very enjoyable. The negatives aren't too bad, but I'm going to end up with a 7 out of 10 for Warcraft. All right, well, that's going to do it for our non-spoilers Warcraft review. I want to thank Gio for joining me today. Where can they find you online, Gio?
Twitter, GioRamos24, and apocalypsemovies.com.
And you can find me, Jacob Bartley, on Twitter at JacobBartley_, on Instagram at Jacob Ryan Bartley, and on this Apocalypse Movies YouTube channel. Subscribe, hit that like button, comment, let us know what you thought of Warcraft, and I'll get back at you. And until next time, you all take care.